Hello there. This is Ian Nethercott from the Auto Hub Show, doing my one-on-one interview. And a happy Easter for everyone who's celebrating. Hopefully, you don't eat too much chocolate. And we're talking to Julia, and she's actually used to live in Vancouver, now lives in Belgium. And very interesting background. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of your story. I know you're sort of wanted to be a PhD person, but maybe didn't get that. And
Yeah.
I was always interested in why someone wanted that. But anyway, go ahead and tell us a little about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I will start with you told people not to eat a lot of chocolate. I'll do the opposite because I'm in Belgium. Chocolate here is fantastic. So if it's Belgium chocolate, feel free to eat it. It's great.
Yeah.
So, yes, a little bit about myself. So the last 13, 14 years I've been in marketing. But as I was saying, in my past life, I wanted to be a university professor. I actually wanted to teach Chinese at
Wow.
university. Yes, very unexpected shift, pivot, so to speak. And I'm one of those few people who are like, I'm 3 times PhD dropout. So I can briefly tell you, like in a very quick summary, how that happened.
Yeah.
So first time, I just basically just got out of school, and in the final year, I was invited to become an instructor to teach Mandarin Chinese for
Okay.
excellence and whatever. So I was like young, ambitious. And they told me you need to have a PhD because, as a university instructor, you're supposed to be enrolled in a PhD program.
Yeah.
Well, I did not have too much interest in the specific professors who were leading different PhD programs. So I chose literature.
Okay.
I chose a PhD in literature. That was very interesting professor there. But when it started, it was not that interesting. I was all like about cognitive science, using unique methodology to teach students and all this kind of stuff. And literature and text analysis was like kind of sideways. So it ended in a year. I decided to go for exchange program to China and did not come back. And I joined the Olympics marketing team, actually. That was
Okay.
like the beginning preview. It was in 2007, 2008.
Okay.
So I left in 2007, and in 2008, I kind of completed the program and did not go back to Ukraine at the time
Right.
and joined the Olympic marketing team. And it was amazing because 2008 Beijing Olympics was very, very rich, I would say, in terms of like the variety of the events happening, the variety of changes happening. Google Map did not exist, guys, dinosaur age.
Yeah.
Google Map did not exist. And like one of the roles of my team was to talk to business owners. Specifically, it was B2B as well. So
Right.
kind of cool. My passion for B2B starts there. And we had to talk to business owners and tell them what is located where and like how they can advertise their business on how it works. So we would tell them that if tourists come and they want to go to a cafeteria or they want to locate themselves where they are, they would give us 3 points and we would find them on the map because Google Maps did not exist. Shortly after that, I think a few months after that, Google Maps started existing. It was on Facebook and all
Yeah.
those good things.
Yeah, I was actually in
And
China in 2019, and I think the only North American tech company that still existed at the time was LinkedIn. Everything else is gone. Google Maps, you'd have to have downloaded the maps before you got there because they have their own Alibaba chat and WeChat and all these other chats that do all those things as well.
yeah, anyways, it was really, really fun, innovative times, and a lot of exposure to marketing, but also advertising. I was mesmerized how big giants like McDonald's and KFC and stuff like that, how they advertise in China. Mind blowing, completely different. During Beijing Olympics, for example, McDonald's was positioning themselves, for God's sake, we are Chinese. We play with China. And the gamification that they created, like I was literally taking notes. I was, taking pictures, taking notes, taking some of the advertising back home to show my students if I ever go
Yeah.
back. I never ended up going back. but it was quite some material. So when one of the games was happening, you could go to McDonald's and you can watch the game. And if China team wins, you get like bonus. And the bonus is every time different. You get like free burger, or you get free
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah.
So of course everybody was hanging out in McDonald's watching like
Yeah.
on the big screen. And everybody loved McDonald's for that. And like the slogan, like "We are Chinese, we are with you, let's celebrate together." That was so freaking powerful. Best advertising ever.
Yeah, I
So
was
yeah,
at a
many examples.
McDonald's. What was it? Shanghai. It was Shanghai. I was at a McDonald's, and they serve fried
Mhm.
chicken at the McDonald's there. And I'm
Yeah.
like, fried chicken at McDonald's? That's odd. So I was talking to the manager who spoke pretty good English at this thing, and I'm like, okay, so you got KFC, you got McDonald's. They both make chicken here for some reason because chicken's big in that market. If you weren't familiar,
Hmm.
actually, one of the founders of Alibaba, he wanted to work at KFC, and then they didn't hire him for whatever reason. But the thing that was interesting, she's like, "Oh, the McDonald's chicken is better," and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, it's
It
so
was
different.
interesting just because that their take on hamburgers in that market like is different. A because of some of it's lost in translation, but B the other thing that I thought was really interesting, specifically at McDonald's and at least in Shanghai at that time, was if you had WeChat or Alibaba Pay, you could literally order food at your table with a QR code and have it delivered, not talk to anybody. You could be sitting at a table at McDonald's and just scan it, order it,
Yeah.
pay for it, and they deliver it to you. You don't have to talk to anybody. So I thought that was really interesting. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting in China was the experiential marketing. And there's good and bad. So the scale of high-end retail was really interesting, just the amount of stuff going on. But also what was interesting was the little differences. So I was at a mall, high-end mall in Shanghai, and everything was very high-end until you went to the bathroom. And then that was like they didn't care about that, so it looked completely different. It was kind of interesting. But the other thing that was really interesting was there was a company that in that market that makes shoes where the top of the shoe there's a zipper around the sole and you could buy like 20 different tops and then just take them
Yeah.
with you when you're traveling and then zipper that on and you'd have like a running shoe or a dress shoe or
Yeah.
whatever. But I thought it was really interesting. But there was also a high-end women's dress store that sold traditional Chinese embroidered silk dresses, I guess. And I
Hmm.
remember because a woman that I went there with, as part of the team from NBA, they were trying to sell these dresses, and they charge anywhere from $300 to $5,000 depending. And she was really not sure what to think of it. It was just kind of interesting, just the innovation in dealing with foreigners in that market compared to Japan, which I went on the way to China. I was in Japan for a couple of days. Was very different. But the other thing that's really interesting, fast forward to today, with the Trump tariffs on China, I don't know if you've seen what's going on this week with TikTok, but the Chinese are now attacking Trump, saying, "Hey, we make all these high-end goods for Louis Vuitton, for all this stuff, and we make them in China," and then they just stick a label on. So they're trying now to sell direct and cut out the high-end retailers, which I think is really interesting. So
Yeah.
in the Chinese Olympics, obviously there's a lot of different countries there. What was sort of the different countries or the different companies take on that market?
Um, Different companies take on that market. You mean like
What did they think? Like, were they have experience in it that they didn't know, or they weren't sure? Like, what were they saying about the market? Like, I had a very different experience in China than I thought I would, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, mostly we have been reaching out to businesses that were not foreign businesses, like the local businesses who
Yeah.
wanted to promote themselves to the foreigners.
Okay.
So yeah, like there was like variety of the experiences. I'm actually one of the not really related but funny experiences when I called up one of the business owners and they talked to me in some sort of dialect, like la 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 la
Yeah.
la. Like I could understand that because I was quite fluent in Chinese by that time.
Yeah.
But I responded and she asked me, "Can you please?" This is like a killer question if you want to know if the foreigner, like if it's a foreigner speaking Chinese, even no matter how fluent they are, or if it's like a local person, ask them to freaking spell the street. Like the spelling of the street by characters is like, first character like in such and such word, second character is
Yeah.
like in the second word. And you would never remember actually how the actual street is spelled because you don't live there and see it every single day. Like it's
Right.
impossible for a
Yeah.
foreigner. And I say, excuse me, I cannot spell the street because I'm a foreigner. And she's like, you bullshit. I was so offended. It ruined my day. I was so offended. Like I'm an actual foreigner.
Well,
There
there's
was
a YouTube video. A guy, I think he's a white guy. Anyway, he's at some Chinese food restaurant. I think it might be North American. Anyway,
yeah.
and he starts ordering in Mandarin Cantonese, and the people who work at the restaurant are just like they're like dumbfounded. They're like looking at the guy, going, "This like what I'm hearing doesn't make sense." Like it was that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it was
Yeah.
funny because when I landed at the airport, there was this lady, and she was a very entrepreneurial. So she knew enough in every language to talk to foreigners. She had a team of drivers who didn't speak the language, but she could negotiate between them and the foreigner. And then what she would do is take payment, and then she'd put you in a cab with somebody. Now, I had prepped for this, so I had a phone that could speak different languages. I had that downloaded. But there was also a guy that was the concierge at the hotel I stayed at. And what this guy did was really interesting. So he knew that foreigners were used to Uber as a brand, but he knew that they couldn't do an Uber there. So what he did is, oh, you need an Uber, and they say, yeah. He said, no problem, let me handle that. So what he would do is he'd use WeChat or Alibaba Pay or whatever to do it, and then he'd make a spread between what they paid him and what he paid the driver. So there's a
So
lot of that
smart.
kind of interesting, what I'd consider entrepreneurial stuff going on. But the funniest example was the concierge at the hotel I stayed at was an iPhone customer, and he had an uncle who lived in California, and he was convinced that the phone that in California was different than the phone in China, even though it was made in Shanghai, which he wasn't aware of. So what he did is he had his uncle buy him a phone in the U.S. and send it to him. And I said, "You realize they're made down the street, right?"
You know what? Unfortunately, I should say that he's right because
Oh,
they are
I'm
made
not saying he's
differently.
wrong. I just thought it was funny.
I mean, like might be made the same, but there are definitely certain elements there, such as
Oh yeah,
spyware and stuff like
I'm
that.
not disagreeing. I mean, there was a lady from Hong Kong who had a VPN on her phone. I talked to
Yeah,
her for breakfast, and she was
which
using
leads me.
Netflix, and I was like, "You really think the Chinese government doesn't know that you have a VPN on your phone in their
Right.
market?
Yeah.
Were you smoking something before you
Yeah.
decided this was a good idea?" Like they had routers in every room. Like these guys weren't playing around. Like it was clear that you were being monitored, doing anything. Like it reminded me of Rush in the '80s. It was very even the airport reminded me of Rush in the '80s. It's like the same stick,
Crazy.
like brutalist architecture and massive scale, and it was very interesting. So, what do you do these days? I mean, I know that you're doing innovation stuff in Vancouver, and you do it obviously in Belgium. What
Yes.
obviously the PhD didn't work out. What do you do
Yeah.
these days? What keeps you interested?
Totally. So basically, I once I got exposure to marketing, I never looked back, and I worked scaling businesses, mostly in the B2B.
Okay.
Scaling businesses, medium-sized businesses mostly, some in the software space, some in just B2B, B2B brick and mortar businesses, which, by the way, I think these businesses are going to make a lot of them are going to make massive comeback, especially, manufacturing and, a lot
Yeah.
of finance businesses are seeing a huge innovation wave because I'm working in the finance industry as well. And a lot of things that could not previously be implemented, such as investment decision making or finance related decision making. It's going to be massive step forward for a lot of these ones because they don't have to be stuck in the past anymore. I hope that the banks are going to follow the lead as well. I'm familiar with what's happening in the banking environment. It's like it's time. Let's just put it this way.
Yeah, there's a
So
company here in town. I think they're called Neo Financial, and they do a lot of this alternative banking. And I work for a company, did some fundraising for a company that was doing automated loans the same way using AI, and and a different banking model. But what was interesting, what I think is interesting, specifically in banking, my brother works as a IT director for a large investment firm out of LA. But what I think is very interesting in banking is just the footprint of not only locations but staff. To me, that's just it's a 40-year-old model that doesn't need to exist. You don't need 100 locations in a metropolitan area with staff hanging around hoping someone shows up. I mean, to me, that makes no sense. All that should be
Yeah.
done virtually. Maybe you have a central location in a city or maybe one or two of them, but you don't need a bank on every corner. Like, to me, that makes no sense. And it's a massive cost. And I've been listening to a book this week and last week called Good to Great, and they were talking about the one of the examples was in banking when it went from monopoly to years ago, where they used to have like these, like fancy dining rooms and custom elevators and all this stuff way back in, I guess, in the 90s. But what I see today is, yeah, those may be gone and banking may be a little more basic than it was in terms of that they're trying to reduce cost. But I see the actual locations, bank locations, being a thing of the past already. They just haven't adapted yet. Like, they will, I think, because, like, you have to adapt to that young consumer, that Gen Z or Beta or Millennial who doesn't physically want to go to a bank ever. Like, they're not
Yeah.
interested.
And not just that, but a lot of financial products that currently don't exist and probably are needed for the future generations,
Yep.
and just the way economy also works. I remember I actually worked at a bank. It's
Wow.
like it was my my longest job was 1 year, which was university Chinese instructor.
Okay.
After that, I had a couple jobs that were like half a year or less in
Okay.
Canada, in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And the job in the bank was my last one.
Mhm.
And that was at BMO, by the way.
Yeah. My
But
brother used to
I
work for them.
remember, yeah, I remember like the educational brochures that they were giving for a population to educate themselves how you should put like $1, another $1, and eventually you have $100 by the end of the year, and you have 1% interest on top of that. You have $101. Well, a lot of products, clearly that $101 doesn't really make math anymore, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of proper financial products for various segments of population need to be created. So starting from there and going all the way into approval and deciding like what to approve, how to approve, all the predictability, how
Yeah.
this based on the spending behavior, how is this customer going to repay the loan and how it can be adjusted if it's a loan, or maybe it's something else, or how the investment is going to go. I think there's crazy amount of opportunities, but also it's kind of interesting how. So about 5 years ago, I got accidentally, almost not like accidentally, interestingly, I got into finance and partnership
Okay.
world, and there were a couple of things that happened. First of all, I decided I want to write more. It was like, was it 5 years? Yeah, it was, oh my gosh, pre-COVID. During COVID, I was like stressed. I
Yeah.
need to do two things. One, I need to write because I finally got back into writing. I used to write a lot before, and then in Canada, I was working like 15 hours a day. So completely that blocked my writing brain out. And now I had all the time in the world. So I returned to writing. And I was publishing some of my articles in a B2B publication, and they did not give me analytics. And then they came back to me 1 year later. It's like, oh, some of your articles are read by Bank of America and, Pfizer and Nokia and whatever. I'm like, what? And you've been published in Bloomberg. I'm like, what? I was like, oh, you didn't see analytics. I'm like, what analytics? Oh, they forgot to give me access. Well, it was a good surprise, but I wish I knew. So that was interesting. Like, so I saw like, and those were articles in like wealth management and
Yeah.
finance specifically. So yeah, I realized like, actually, yeah, maybe I should keep doing that. And
Uh,
yeah,
that brings up another story. So I had
sure.
a class called managerial finance as part of my degree. And the prof I thought was a little bit too big for his britches when he first started the class. He said, "This is the most important class that you're going to learn about." And he was talking specifically about financial markets. And if you look in most investment advisors' office at a bank or even an investment house, they have these famous like big board with stock performance from the past. So it's like a big graph with all kinds of colors on it. So he said, okay, what's the mean average performance for the last 100 years in the U.S. stock market on average? What's that number? And there's a lot of bankers in the room because they're getting an MBA because they want to be, I don't know, venture capitalists or reverse mergers or whatever they're doing. And they're all like, oh, we don't know. So he's like, well, between 7 and 9%. And then you heard you're looking at these investment advisors or high net worth managers. There's some of them as well, and they're all like, of course, telling people they can get them 20 points on their money or whatever their stick is. And it's funny because I guess about a year and a half ago, I was in because I have a corporation. I was in getting that corporation set up, and I was talking to one of these financial advisors at a bank, and she had the same signature thing behind her, and she was talking about mutual funds and RSPs and whatever her vehicles are. And I said, that's all the past, right? She goes, what do you mean? I go, well, that might as well be written in stone. Like it makes no difference what the past was. And she goes, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, what's the return? I asked her the same question. She didn't have an answer. So I said, so if it's 7 to 9%, if that's 100 years of history in the U.S. stock market, it's probably more around the world, whatever. What should I pay you to do that for me?
Yeah.
And that was another question that she didn't have. So what got me interested in that more is I actually had a Swiss company, approach me to want to help them buy companies that they invest in and flip. Kind of basically is their stick. And the thing that was interesting to me about it was the challenges. To your point, is not per se the instrument; those can be customized. The challenge is finding that opportunity. And that's really where the person needs to be not only versed, but also has to be able to market themselves and why they're different from Bob or Frank or Jane or whatever. But the banking model, where people have access to capital historically, if they met certain criteria, is broken because they're missing opportunities because they don't have a product. They just don't.
Yes.
Like they never
Exactly.
thought about it that way even. And that was kind of interesting because I was going through that process, which was multi-stage, and they were kind of thinking about it like a venture cap firm, say in San Francisco or New York, about sort of how you buy companies, how you invest, how you flip them, whatever. And I said, well, that's not really how you want to look at it, because the companies of a century ago, or even 50 years ago, or even 30 years ago, are very different from the companies today. And not only that, that change is accelerating. So those models may not work in 20 years. I mean, that's what I think is fascinating when you look at things like AI, technology, global markets, which is happening right now with Trump. He's upending probably the default currency, which is going to be interesting. But so from a marketing standpoint, you work with companies on a B2B site where they are doing marketing and want to scale it. Is that kind of what your client base is?
Yes. So there are three potential situations,
Okay.
roughly speaking. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
So one of them, let's say, they are, customer in B2B space, maybe software, maybe not, and they want to scale. So usually the majority of them are like in somewhere between 10 to 40 million, and they want to get 50 plus, and they are
Okay.
most of the time they're a little bit stuck for a certain amount of time and don't know why. And a lot of times they also want to break into new markets.
Okay.
So meaning they need to sell to other people, or most of the time sell differently to other people also. Because, if you sell to different the demographics, they want to also be sold differently, which is not everybody is ready for that. So sometimes it stops there. There is another situation, which is it's a PE firm. So it's a PE firm, and they have multiple businesses. A lot of the time, multiple businesses that are across a variety of industries.
Yeah. Like Procter and
And
Gamble or whatever. Yep.
yeah, and sometimes they're in the same industry, but a lot of times we also see like it's across variety of the industries. For example, like there is a recent case, a company acquired PE firm acquired like 40 different businesses, and they don't even know which one of each of the businesses is. I mean, like they do know, generically speaking,
Yeah.
what each of the businesses is doing and how well they are performing. But they don't really, we started talking to them about partnerships and like how they can, because if you build partnerships, if you have businesses, if you have 40 businesses, I'm sure as heck some of the businesses can collaborate with each other and create additional value. And this is
Absolutely.
like a very much low-hanging fruit opportunity that does not cost you money. You own these businesses
Yeah.
already,
Yeah.
and just connect them. And
Yeah.
they say, oh, we actually don't know like what the opportunities are. Like, yeah. So that is like this is something that we see happening a lot. There's another case where there was PE firm that owned 40 locations just for the sake of numbers.
Yeah.
So I give you an example.
Yeah.
So they own independent living homes in 40 different locations in the United States.
Yeah.
So 40 locations and, of various sizes.
Yeah.
And their customer annual value is 36,000, which is quite significant.
Yeah.
So they have been doing some marketing, they have been doing some radio, like they have
Yeah.
been doing a little bit of everything. And when we asked them about partnerships, they said like, yeah, we do have some partnerships. But across those 40 locations, they only were able to generate like 3 million. So that's nothing. That's like
Yeah.
less
That's
than
fine.
peanuts, less than coffee. Probably if you ordered like each member of the staff coffee, that would not be enough
Yeah.
for the whole year. So after we implemented the partnership system, the untapped value was 170 million in total per year.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is insane. Like, imagine how much money you would need to spend in ads to hit that amount of money. Even like with the best return on investment,
Yeah.
that would be just impossible.
Yeah. I
Nobody has
interviewed a
that.
company at NADA this year in New Orleans called Velo. So they own a bunch of different properties. I think 5 companies in the service side of the business. And I actually just released an interview yesterday. They were announcing a partnership at that event 2 months ago. I just got approval from one of the partners to release it. And it was funny because I'm going through this interview and I'm trying to sort of relate it because they have 4 companies and this is the 5th. So the only thing I could think of on the fly was Subway $5 footlong for some reason. I don't know. That just sort of came into my head. So I'm like, oh, so you have 4 choices, but now you have 5, kind of like Subway. It's a five options. And they, of course, loved it because it was kind of humorous. But, the thing that was interesting is the gentleman who runs the company, he used to work for an equity firm where he'd buy companies. And he then was running this, and they're basically doing that. So they're looking at, okay, the service side of automotive business, there's a bunch of different software. They just keep buying these pieces of software. So eventually what you're going to see is, to your point, they're going to either acquire or partner with companies that sell other things. So whether that's tires or oil change products or whatever. But
Exactly.
the thing that was really interesting was as I've looked back 6 years, I've been going to NAD every year for I think around 6 or 7 years now. Every year I see 3 camps. So I see the big Goliaths like Cox Automotive and CDK Global and other companies. I see them; they're a huge company. They have a lot of global revenue. Then you see companies that are kind of mid-sized that have bought some companies. So let's just say they started out as 5 companies and now they're 1. So they're growing. And then you have all these little companies that kind of have an idea and you're not sure where they're going to go. Like they could be out of business next year, they could grow, who knows? But the thing that's surprising to me, and Amazon actually had sort of joined this year. They were physically at ADA, which was kind of interesting. But it's surprising to me that these big companies, so the multi-billion-dollar companies, that a lot of them are legacy, aren't buying more of these smaller companies. Like they aren't basically scouting, going, okay, well, here's 3 pieces of technology that we have to build ourselves, which we don't need to build ourselves. We just buy these guys, they go away, and we own that company. They're not looking at it that way. Instead, they're kind of in a silo with their products. So like CDK is a good example. They own ADP, which is a payroll company. They own CDK. They bought Roadster, which is a digital retail product. And they have obviously some software, but they should be buying other companies to widen into the different spaces. So they should be buying companies, say, in the fixed op side with technology like UVI, to pick a random one.
Yes.
Or they should be buying companies in lending, or buying companies that do trade in value, or that do optimization and security. There was a company, really interesting company I interviewed at the show this year, who started out in banking. So they started out with compliance and banking because banks were messing stuff up at scale. And then they said, oh, well, we could adapt that to automotive dealerships who deal with funding, but are clowns and have, like, photocopy driver's licenses and totally insecure, and they have to be compliant. So that was kind of interesting just because they pivoted. But the thing that was really interesting is when you look at different verticals. So whether it be banking in general, consumer banking, whether it be corporate banking, whether it be retail in general, a lot of this stuff is the same. It's just a question of, to your point, okay, if I'm helping Porsche with retail, or if I'm helping Porsche with websites or customer journey or whatever that is, there's nothing to say I couldn't do the same for Louis Vuitton. It's basically the same thing. There's really no difference other than what you're selling. So those companies that are locked into a certain, vertical or silo should be saying, okay, well, why don't I then do this as well? Because it's the same problem, right? I've been reading in this book, and they're talking about the hedgehog concept. And I don't know if you're familiar with the hedgehog concept, but the story is pretty simple. There's a fox that wants to eat this hedgehog. And every day the fox, he gets, sneaky. He knows the hedgehog's going to walk around and he's going to eat it. But the hedgehog is bright, but doesn't have to move fast because he's got defenses. So all he does, he waits for the fox to, try to attack him, and he just rolls up in a ball, and he's got chainmail. He can't, they have spikes. And the thing that was interesting about it is they were talking about businesses, and they were talking about examples of different businesses. And the thing that's interesting when you look at directly competitive businesses, so they were using Walgreens and one of their competitors. And they were basically, the guy at Walgreens looked at it really simply. They said, listen, for us, it's about convenience and dollars per customer spend. It's not about amount of locations. That's irrelevant. It's about how can we be the go-to place for people in terms of convenience so they spend more. That's it. That's the whole scenario. It doesn't matter the products even. It doesn't matter the store layout. That makes no difference.
I like that. It's nice.
It's very, very smart.
Simple. Yeah.
And then they were talking about, I think it was Pitney Bowes, because Pitney Bowes was a dominant, and then they got, obliterated. So they had to adapt. But the thing that was constant, and it was interesting because they were talking about leadership. They said, well, most companies, they'll hire that bravado leader like Donald Trump, not to pick a random guy. It could be anything. It could be Lee Iacocca is another example, or the guy Carlos Ghosn from Nissan. They could hire this colorful guy who's a great speaker, but that's not the person to take their company to the next level, because without that person, there's a problem, right? Because that person goes away and they haven't built the systems out. He says what you want to hire is somebody who's a very introverted person who focuses on making that company better and building the people in place. Because they were talking about GE today, and everyone thinks of GE as a product company, but it's not a product company. GE is a management training company. That's what they do. They're probably some of the best in the world at it. So you have to figure out what your hedgehog concept is, like what you're the best at, and do that. It might take you 5 years, to your point. But once you figure that out, it's actually very easy to do it because you just get the best in the world at that thing. And Apple's another good example. They used to have, when I worked I worked as a reseller for Apple Computer, and at the time they had like 10,000 different products that nobody understood. And then when Jobs came back, they said, no, we have 4. Well, these other products, we're not selling those no more. It was just making it simple. So I think the challenge for a lot of businesses, to your point, are they're missing the revenue opportunities that are already there. And I've been focusing on this a lot in the service show that I do on Fridays, where it's like car dealers are now worried about selling cars because of tariffs. But what they only focus on occasionally is the lifetime value of customers who are coming into their store every day for service. That's where all the money is. The selling of cars is a nice window dressing, but really all the money is in making sure that customer never goes anywhere else.
Oh my gosh.
That's really what it comes down to. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's really where banking is a good example of this. The banking customers are captive because it's painful to switch. But if it was easy to switch, they wouldn't be captive anymore.
Yeah.
They'd move. So the only question is, when is it going to be not painful to switch? Probably soon, would be my
Uh,
guess, right?
Quite
And then
soon.
they're in
Yeah.
trouble. Like it's like deregulation of banking back in this example with I think it was Bank of America was one of the companies. But at the end of the day, change is happening at an accelerated pace. The only question is, what are you doing as a business to not just spend money on marketing, but to think strategically on how do I grow my business in the best possible way? And I think that's pretty much what you do. You go in and you say, okay, here are the three examples. Your example one, okay, let's take a look at the problem or the opportunity, right?
Yeah. Honestly speaking, the first number one step that businesses need to face, like regardless of those examples, like be it a P, like massive PE firm, one of the PE firms I'm working with right now, I cannot even name because they
Yeah, that's
own
fine.
like a tool that everybody uses if they have a website. They
Yeah,
own that technology and like 90% of the market.
yeah,
But even them, and they're like multi-billion-dollar
mm,
corporation, they have massive, massive holes
yep,
that if they patched, they would save quite some billions. Like,
yep,
and those holes are not different a lot of times from $1 million businesses.
yep,
And that is like, I was so shocked. I mean, like, I was so shocked the first time when I saw a $50 million business, $50 million in revenue, annual revenue. When they have like, hiccups like that, I was first time shocked. Then I saw it at 100 million, and I see it that, multiple $1 billion businesses have the same freaking problems. Don't know how they function with those problems, but they kind of figured out on the way to do that. So that's quite interesting. I have an interesting story about acquiring those small businesses
okay,
to
go
a
ahead.
point, because some people actually do that. So that was quite hilarious and unexpected for me when that happened. So I think like about half a year ago, maybe like 4 months ago, like I post, I don't like post every day, but like I do post sometimes on LinkedIn about innovation, scaling
Yeah,
businesses, compliant copy and stuff like that. But that time I decided to post something different about myself, like people don't know stuff about me, that I like manga and jazz. So I posted, like, I made this post, like, why I also like to hang out with people who like manga and jazz, and wrote a little bit about that, and posted like my, when I did my master's degree in Vancouver, I devoted the whole first page to one of my favorite manga characters because
yeah,
he kind of kept me alive for the whole 2 years of, struggling with that. So I
right.
posted that picture in my post. And director of AT&T Innovation reached out to me and said, "Oh my, I also like jazz, but we need to talk about innovation." And we had a very nice conversation. And they actually strategically were like having ears out there for innovative companies, innovative products, specifically in the finance space, by the way.
Yep,
Like what is existing out there that we don't have to build, that we can acquire and or invest in, and or run a test in various market segments. And we're going to
yep,
listen to you
yep.
where you think we can, implement it, because they're massive. They have like lots of different, products and markets, both in Latin America and also in the United States. So that was quite eye-opening because that was something I didn't know. I mean, like I know, it happens, but when you face it, firsthand, that was quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I see, and it's kind of interesting as I went through this journey because I interview a lot of people at these shows, and I've also had the opportunity to interview people who their companies have been acquired as I went through this journey. And the thing that's interesting from my point of view, and I think you're right, you want to be constantly looking at this. The thing that's interesting is a number of these guys not only sell their companies often, like they'll build a company, they'll sell it, they'll build another company, they'll sell it. The bigger players that should have someone like yourself or someone who knows that looking for that aren't doing that. And the reason they're not doing that is I don't know. So for example, and in this book they were talking about Pitney Bowes. They used to have a 100% lock on the mailing market because they owned the technology that people used to do stamps way back. They were very successful because they owned 100% of the market, but that didn't last. So when you look at companies like companies maybe years ago that made checks, like bank checks for businesses.
Oh gosh.
I mean, I haven't had a check in I don't know 25 years, maybe longer. But there are still companies that do that. So the question then becomes, how do you pivot? Well, you look at other technology that maybe is relatable to the same customers. When you look at things like fax machines is one that it kind of makes me laugh. There's actually an app you can get for your phone now that'll allow you to fax. You can take a picture, it'll center it, it'll do that, and you can fax directly from your cell phone without even having a
Yeah.
document. It's hilarious. But these kind of opportunities are out there. But more importantly, if I'm a business and I have a big incoming capital revenue and I'm looking to get ahead of that next eight ball, which is coming, acquiring those companies built by young entrepreneurs and then managing that company, much like Buffett does, he buys companies and leaves them alone. That's a smart way to do that. But I think when you're looking at marketing, and not to beat up marketing, because I talk to a lot of marketing people who really just want to sell you marketing, which is fine. Um, there's nothing unique about them because all they do is sell you marketing, and there's probably more people that do that than there's business. But there's people who, are saying, hey, before we do that, let's get a better understanding of your business and how I can help you. Marketing may be part of that. Like I have a buddy who lives in San Francisco. He's a fractional CMO and he works with a lot of different companies. And it's really not about marketing for him. It's about where can I add value in that ecosystem that may involve marketing. So I think that's really where things are about to get interesting. And a couple of years ago, they were talking about Web 3.0, which reminded me a lot of Lawnmower Man from the 90s, where they were trying to resell the same concept that didn't sell then. But I still think that there is opportunity there. But the key thing is companies can't know everything, but what they need to do is employ or hire or buy that talent so that they're not behind because the senior management of a lot of these companies is not on the younger side anymore, right? There's a lot of older senior management. When I look at auto to pick an industry, the average dealer owner is I think 65 years old today, between 65 and 72, depending on how you look at it. So these guys aren't really switched on to what's going on, right? They're just not. And I would argue that the OEM level, the manufacturers, also aren't
Yes.
really current. I mean, I've heard a lot as the tariffs have happened where a lot of the OEMs are just like, yeah, we're going to see what happens and then we'll adapt. Like that's a mistake.
Yeah,
So
there's so much
these
money
are
there too.
yeah, it's stupid, stupid.
Yeah, we had a case where we consulted on like a tiny portion of one manufacturing company. The amount of money that is like sitting on the surface is in multiple millions. It's just ridiculous.
Yes.
So, people just don't realize. And you know what's interesting? People actually practically do not realize that this money is real, like real. So you talk to them like, how much you're making. We're making like 70 million a year. Fantastic. Look here, you're losing, like it's math, right? Like it's going through, like you see, it's like, let's do the
Yeah.
calculations. It's right in front of you. You check analytics. It's like none of the numbers are invented or anything. You do the math for them because of XYZ here, like, your website or advertising. Most of the time it's just website and simple stuff, buttons. You're losing here 1.5 million. I was like, cannot be true. How a website can lose me 1.5 million? Well, math again, and like a lot of people like just don't. They choose not to believe it. So, as one of my good mentors from California, as he's saying, like a lot of times, analytics and data for people is not to make decisions, is to create their own. It's to protect their own religious beliefs about their business. So
Oh yeah. Oh
that's
yeah, I
happening.
had the opportunity to work for a website company for 3 years. So I've worked with, I've looked at probably 40,000 websites or more. And what surprised me doing that, not even selling websites, not even supporting those websites, but looking at websites at scale, like all over
Mhm.
the place, all kinds of websites, was the consistency of errors was shocking to me. The amount of the same error. It got to the point where I was like, wow, like these are basic things that need to be fixed. So when you're looking for a client, like what are you looking for? How can you help them? How do you work?
Yeah, so most of the time, if it's a business, especially in the B2B space that is making 10 million plus and they are looking to grow, I mean, it's of course better if they are maybe larger revenue, but it also depends.
Right,
Or if they're like an investment company or PE firm that want to uncover untapped revenue. I like to find revenue in places where people don't expect. This is my thing, and I never start working on any paid channels before we uncover something that is literally sitting there on the table without additional resources.
right.
So it could be partnership, it could be a simple button on the website, it could be some other ridiculous places where people don't know. But yeah, essentially, if they are at that scale and they want to find where they're losing money, and then grow, because if they don't fix those holes, they're gonna, unfortunately, it happens a lot that those holes start leaking much, much more and bleeding, and company might be affected because of that.
There will
So
be
yeah.
details below on how to reach out to Julia. She's pretty active on LinkedIn, so obviously I'll include details there. And then obviously you can reach out to her via email. I'll include that in. If there's details in terms of that you want a conversation or you want her to look at something, I'm sure she can help there. So what has been the result of some of the I guess partnership or companies you work with? Like what's the upside for them?
Yeah, so I mean, like the biggest one, I was just saying, across 40 locations for independent living homes, that was untapped revenue of 170 million a year. This is like the biggest one so far. A small but impressive one, we have been, I mean, like it's not small, but the size of the business per location was much smaller. Medical spas. So we audited just one Google account for 70 locations of medical spas. So just medical spas and, clicking on the ad and stuff like that. We found 6 million just in that one Google account of literally lost revenue, not untapped, not anything. You spend
Right.
the same amount of money, fix a few errors, you get additional 6 million a year. That was like mind blowing from just one channel.
Good investment of capital to figure that out and execute on it, maybe.
Yeah, it's no, it was actually like it was ridiculous. Like you can create A/B test of because it was various locations, but the landing page was exactly the same, which makes no sense because different demographics there.
Yeah.
So conversion rate was all over the place. But if you just create active A/B test, it solves the problem.
Oh yeah. I mean,
That's
these
finished.
problems are solvable. The challenge I think some businesses have is they don't have the specialized talent in house to do that, or they don't have the specialized talent who's paying attention because they're too
You
busy
nailed
doing
it.
the job, right? They're not
Yes.
necessarily, and these days I actually saw a post on LinkedIn. It was pretty funny. It was a guy walking down the street with a sombrero that was like 10 times scale, and it was like, "Are you wearing too many hats?" And I was like, "That's brilliant. That was
Yes.
hilarious." Reminded me of a job I had in the 90s. Well, thanks for taking the time today. Obviously, the details will be below, and I'm sure Julia can find you some hidden gold there and give you some thoughts on how to improve your business. And have yourself a great weekend. I hear the weather's improving there. You might get some sun, I hear.
Thank you, Ian.
All right.